All politics is identity politics. Welcome to Identity Politics, everyone. I'm Kevin Deanna, and I know there's a lot going on. The air war against Iran threatens to turn into a ground conflict as President Donald Trump lurches from seemingly trying to find a way out to threatening to invade Kharg Island in order to threaten Iran's oil industry. He's also threatened to bomb Iran's power infrastructure unless the Strait of Hormuz is reopened. And look, I'm not one of these people who thinks like this is the end of the American empire. Again, American casualties are comically low compared to just the air war phase of the first Persian Gulf War against Iraq. And we just remember that as like a romp. But gas prices are going up, $4 a gallon in some places. We've gotten contradictory arguments about all this. We've gotten really no justification about why America needs to be doing this. And of course, behind all of this, come on. Like, we all know the score here. No Israel, no war. This is not even controversial at this point, even if you think it's a good idea, which needless to say, I don't. But we also have to talk about why nationalists should care. We want to be sovereign. We want to be independent. Americanism, not globalism, will be our credo and all that. Well, what does that even mean? Look at this country right now. It's a vastly different place demographically than it was even 20 years ago. 2001, right after 9/11, that was probably the last time you could save the country without too much pain, just by controlling the border and stopping immigration. George W. Bush did the opposite, even dramatically increasing Muslim immigration. Now, I don't think we're being edgy or LARPy or even particularly radical by asking at this point, what is it that we are trying to defend? Like, what specifically? There is still an America. It's still our home. It's the only place we've got. It's still our country, but vast areas of it are essentially occupied. And I don't mean occupied in the sense that some might say our government is occupied or our power structure is occupied. I mean physically occupied by people who are not American, do not consider themselves to be American, and were specifically imported because they are not American. How many times have we seen ICE attempt to enforce immigration laws in this country, laws which make no reference to race, maybe they should, and yet we instantly see the foreign flags go up and millions of people in this country, if not of this country, immediately understand that this is a battle over identity, not the law, and they roll out. It's not a question of nationalism versus cosmopolitanism or anything like that. It's just a question of which side you are on. Which nation do you belong to? Nation versus nation within our own borders. So when we say something like, well, we want America to be independent and sovereign, that's the first precondition. This is what we need to do, anything else. But it's not, actually. There actually has to be an America that exists to begin with. Like, what needs to be independent and sovereign? This is something I'm trying to get through to everyone. There is a time limit here. If you are a white South African, if you're a Boer, what possible difference does it make to you if modern South Africa is ruled by foreigners or not? What exactly do you have in common with most of your fellow countrymen? What even is the country at this point? You have a nation, sure, everybody has a nation, but that nation does not have a state. I think we all know the situation on that front when it comes to South Africa. The question is, are we already there when it comes to America? America is a nation, but is the state the United States? That's a separate question. Understand this is what's coming for all of us. There comes a point where the demographic situation in the United States sort of makes everything else irrelevant. Because, look, let's be blunt. If the country is 70% non-white, what difference does it make? What's the strongest foreign lobby? What difference does it make if the federal deficit triples, quadruples, quintuples? Who cares? What difference does it make if the military is strong or weak? I mean, Rand Paul and these other libertarians, they're talking about running for president again. Rand Paul is saying, oh, I'm going to run again. All these people are getting excited. Oh, we're going to talk about the federal deficit and the size of the government and everything else. Who cares? What could possibly be less important than talking about federal spending or the deficit or what level of bureaucracy government is allowed to handle problems at? Where do you think we are? The Constitution stopped mattering like a century before you were born. It'd be like complaining that the monarchy doesn't have enough power in the United Kingdom. It's just irrelevant. What matters? The nation is the people. It's not the institutions. It's not the Constitution. It's not even the territory. It's the people. Now, the problem, of course, is that rightly or wrongly, white Americans associate their nation with America itself. That is, the collective political expression, our flag, our government, our Constitution, everything else. Now, you can bemoan that. You can write clever arguments about why it shouldn't be that way, how it's outdated. I know I have in the past, but that is the way it is. You can complain about it all you want. You can make fun of people for it all you want, but that's still the way it is. And who is it, after all, that we're trying to lead or save or represent? And if we're not trying to represent white Americans, what the hell are we doing here? Why should anybody care? Now, what makes it worse is that power doesn't see it that way. It doesn't allow whites to claim ownership over America. And this may make white Americans deluded. I mean, ideally, white America would stand for itself and only for itself, but that requires a racial consciousness and political organization that does not yet exist. The fallback position is basically that whites regard themselves as the only unhyphenated Americans. And yet at some level that is true, and everyone else also concedes it. That's why there's a separate black national anthem, right? That's like why we're not even surprised when non-whites in Congress talk about their country and their identity, and it doesn't mean the United States. That's why liberals perceive expressions of patriotism or military strength or anything like that as somehow racist or offensive, or they may even outright oppose it, even though in theory they should have a stake in those things too, but they don't. And they know they don't. And they know they want no part of it. Like, this is how we're trapped. There's no scenario where America just goes away somehow, and then from a position of no power, we get all power. It's going to take organization now. And there's going to need to be some sort of institutional or legal framework for getting these people out of here if we're serious about reclaiming the country or even having part of it. Now, the most important part of that is birthright citizenship. Why? Several reasons. First of all, in terms of a magnet to attract both legal and illegal immigrants to this country, there is nothing more important than birthright citizenship. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to make any oath to this country. You don't have to be a part of anything to get citizenship now. You just have to be born here. And it can be done as artificially and cynically as possible. We'll get into that in a second. Now, ICE is not going to literally round up and deport every illegal immigrant in the country, certainly not under this legal regime. But you can make a lot of people just leave. Now, if I'm an illegal immigrant right now, I'm not going to leave. I'm just going to try to outlast Trump. And I know the media and the Democrats and the judges are all on my side. But you get rid of birthright citizenship, now there's more to risk. Why not just take the money offered by the government and go home and never come back? Second, if you get rid of birthright citizenship, that at a more fundamental level raises the key question: what is an American? Now, we all know what an American is, as Sam Hyde said. As an aside, they just changed the algorithm on X, so instead of seeing these bizarre anti-white hatred posts from all these Indians, we're seeing posts from Japan. Turns out the Japanese love us, and what do they think of when they think of Americans? They think of barbecue, they think of cowboys, they think of baseball, they think of action movies, like actual American culture, not third world slop. We know this. The Japanese know this. You know this. You know what an American is. But we aren't allowed to say that in law. Now, that wasn't always true. First immigration act in this country was the 1790 Naturalization Act, which limited naturalization to free white people. This is important because, one, it means that the founders did not intend for this country to be for everyone, and two, race was not merely invented or invented recently. They, in fact, knew what a white person was. And it also means that anyone who was considered eligible for naturalization or citizenship at the time was white, and everybody agreed on it. So we don't need to play these games of how the Irish became white, or did you know that Italians weren't considered white? Well, they were here in antebellum America and were considered white, so they were. Like, I just disproved your entire college education. You can thank me later. We don't even have to talk about these things. Supreme Court Justice Roger Taney said in Dred Scott, he said that slaves were not citizens of the United States, obviously, and he said that blacks had, quote, no rights which the white man was bound to respect. Now, after the Civil War, the slaves were freed. They were given citizenship, contrary to the hopes of those like Abraham Lincoln, who wanted to send them to Africa, but that was the choice made. But of course, this citizenship was just meant for those guys, just for these freed slaves, not everyone on earth. But the precedent is set. At some level, during our entire history, again, we all know what an American is, but we have this one exception. We have this one group of people because a lot of Americans feel bad for them. But now this precedent has been extended where it brings in the entire world. Everyone on earth is a potential American. And if that is the case, it means nothing to be an American. So how do we overcome this? You get rid of birthright citizenship, we can start having a real discussion again. You have this phrase tossed around like heritage American. Who is that? Well, really, it's just another way of saying actual American. And to some extent, we all know that this country's identity more or less depends on having a European majority. And without that, it ceases to be a real country. But we lack even the vocabulary to define it in these terms, at least in the mainstream, because everything is just done in terms of legalism and paperwork and documents. But you get rid of birthright citizenship, now we're talking about something real. That alone is a reason to scrap it. Another reason, birthright citizenship is inherently a bad faith arrangement. You can't not take advantage of it. It makes you a sucker to have it. There are entire companies set up that offer what is called birth tourism. So, for example, the New York Post reports just a couple days ago, U.S. territory turned tropical maternity ward has produced thousands of American babies for parents living in China. Now, note the scare quotes there around American. Obviously, that's right. That's the case where you actually want scare quotes. But if you put the guy who wrote that, the editor, to the question and said, what did you mean by putting America in quotes there, he's going to apologize. He's going to back down. You can't defend that given contemporary law and morality. What do you mean these people aren't real Americans? They have American citizenship. They have an American passport. How exactly are they less American than you and me? What exactly is an American? What are you getting at? No normal conservative has answers to these questions. And yet somehow we all know the answers. Anyway, the article says, quote, pregnant Chinese women have turned a tropical paradise into a maternity ward, pumping out babies who automatically become U.S. citizens daily. The Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands, a U.S. territory northeast of Guam in the Pacific Ocean, has been flooded with so-called birth tourists since 2009, when then President Barack Obama, of course, introduced a visa waiver program for Chinese nationals. China watchers estimate about 1,000 companies offer birth tourism to the Northern Mariana Islands, other U.S. territories, and even the U.S. mainland. They claim a gobsmacking 1.5 million American babies are being raised in China by Chinese parents who've participated in birth tourism, unquote. Now think about the scale of that. That's more people than live in Wyoming. That's more people than live in Alaska. That's more people than live in Vermont. Think of all the problems the Somalis alone have caused in this country. That alone, babies being raised in China, who the law regards just as American as you, those people alone, 5 times as many people as the high-end estimate of Somalis in this country. There are about 300,000 in this country. Now we're talking 1.5 million. Even if that number is exaggerated, this is the scale of what we're dealing with. And that's just one of these schemes. Just one. One territory. Because Barack Obama thought it would be funny. The article continues, quote, in a March 9th letter to 3 Trump cabinet secretaries, Republican lawmakers demanded an accounting on Chinese birth tourism. The concern is about these children born to Chinese parents. Do the parents have connections to the Chinese Communist Party, which is an adversarial government to the U.S.? Chris Chmielewski, president of the nonprofit Immigration Accountability Project, told the Post regarding the letter, unquote. Now, isn't this just perfect boomer conservatism? They can't but think of it in terms of, oh, it's the Chinese Communist Party. It's a plot by a foreign government. It's all about military and strategic. Yeah, okay, it is that. Or it could be, at least. I mean, China is a serious country, unlike us. It has a serious government, unlike us. It doesn't recognize dual citizenship, unlike us. But it is willing to weaponize it, to take advantage of naive foreigners. And of course, this is another example of how everybody knows that China is a competitor, but for some reason, we just aren't allowed to do the obviously good things that China does that makes it strong, like discriminating in favor of their own people. But, that's an aside. It's not just a plot from this one government. It's not just, the communists to do whatever it is they're going to do. It's actually worse than that. You have free money, our money, on the table, and the rest of the world is obviously just going to take advantage of it. There may not be like a conscious central plan from the top down at all. It's just everybody at once noticing what's going on. And of course, it's not just China. Like, obviously, the American center-right is going to complain about China, and maybe if they're really edgy, they'll mention a few other places. But that's because those are the foreigners, to some extent, you're allowed to complain about. It's really the whole world that's taking advantage of this. And there are some places, of course, that left-wingers are allowed to hate. Of course, who are the only foreigners that left-wingers are allowed to hate? That's right, Russia. So everybody admits the facts here. Back in 2019, The AP went after this angle, and of course they went after it because it's about Russia. This is an article from the AP entitled, Mother Russia, South Florida Sees a Boom in Birth Tourism. Quote, every year, hundreds of pregnant Russian women travel to the United States to give birth so their child can acquire all the privileges of American citizenship. They pay anywhere from $20,000 to sometimes more than $50,000 to brokers who arrange their travel documents, accommodations, and hospital stays, often in Florida. While the cost is high, their children will be rewarded with opportunities and travel advantages not available to their Russian countrymen. The parents themselves may benefit someday as well. And the decidedly un-Russian climate in South Florida and the posh treatment they've received in the maternity wards, unlike dismal clinics back home, can ease the financial sting and make the practice seem more like an extended vacation. The Russians are part of a wave of birth tourists that includes sizable numbers of women from China and Nigeria. So again, this has all been known for years. And you can't say, well, the mainstream media is not reporting this. It is reporting this. The mainstream media is not covering this up. USA Today reported on this just a day or two ago. Same points as other articles. USA Happy Baby, birth tourism, and a blockbuster Supreme Court case. Now, USA Happy Baby, what a ridiculous title, right? But that's actually the name of one of these Chinese companies scamming us, where they set up a vacation for you here in the States to have the kid and become an American. I mean, that's the kind of name you would expect. But that's the essence of being American, apparently. Like this cheap company, then you just get this identity. The fact that this is happening at all should settle this case. That should be enough to say, okay, we got to get rid of this. But even with the most outrageous cases like this, what are you competing with? You're competing with pictures of crying immigrant children on television. You have journalists saying things like, the Supreme Court said children of color aren't good enough to be Americans. How are you going to stand up to that? Is Chief Justice John Roberts, who is obsessed with preserving the so-called legitimacy of the Supreme Court, going to stand up to that? I highly doubt it. But I don't want to blackpill you here. Nothing actually happened yet. It's going to happen this week. I didn't think they were going to repeal Roe v. Wade, and here we are. So we got to wait and see. And look, if it goes through, this is all Trump. It is the Trump administration through an executive order that said we're getting rid of birthright citizenship, and now this has gone to the Supreme Court. This is going to be decided this week. This really matters. This is for everything. I'm willing to forgive a lot if we get this. And there's another reason that a lot of people are not talking about why getting rid of birthright citizenship matters and why we have to really follow what happens with the Supreme Court this week. Why? Because it provides a legal framework for reconquering the United States, for remigration. What do I mean by that? People are talking around this term, remigration, but let's get serious here. Do you really understand what that's going to entail? Really think about that. Oh, they're all going to go back. Yeah, we say this all the time. What does that really mean? Because look, I'm going to level with you. I'm not going to lie to you guys. It would be very easy for me to take one of two stances here. One, Trump has got this. Trust the plan. Everything will be fine. Enjoy the show. We've already won. Two, Trump is owned. Trump is a traitor. The solution is to punish them by having Trump and the Republicans lose, and then somehow, I don't know what happens next, but we get to win. Leave aside for the moment, and I promise you, the Republicans do not care if they win or lose the midterms. That's why they're not passing the SAVE Act, even out of self-interest. They're already looking past all that. They want to get to their corporate lobbying jobs. You can't really punish these people in the political system. You can only replace them. How do we actually get what we want? You're not going to like this answer. It's a long, boring political struggle that's going to require a lot of hard work, dedication, cool heads, political organization, and dealing with people who you may not necessarily agree with on everything or even like. We are not going to win by watching streaming shows or watching TV. I'm sorry. I wish we could. You got to take over the American right and then take over the state. That's the plan. And believe it or not, if you consider where we were 10 years ago, a lot of progress has been made. But even if you pull that off, that's not even the hard part. All of that means nothing unless you basically implement a new legal regime. People toss around phrases, oh, send them back, mass deportations, remigration. Okay, well, what does that mean? How? Consider, if you get rid of birthright citizenship, You have not only reduced one of the major incentives to keep coming in, you've also established as law that a lot of people who have American citizenship right now really shouldn't. Think about the implications of this. Now, I doubt even if we win this case, they're going to retroactively strip American citizenship from all these people who have it. That's probably too much to hope for, but you have it in law that, look, basically we've got all these people who are American, but they got it essentially via fraud. And that's when you get into denaturalization. What does that mean? That's when you actually strip citizenship from a person. Well, why isn't Trump doing that? Well, he is doing it. He's doing it right now. Hasn't been done very often, but it's already starting. This from the Washington Examiner. Trump DOJ ramps up denaturalization for migrants who hid crimes. You may notice that the guy who wrote this article is our friend Keelan Deese. He was the author. He was back on the show on episode 87. He's DOJ correspondent for the Washington Examiner, so he's covering this. He writes, quote, "The Justice Department under the Trump administration escalated its efforts this week to strip citizenship from individuals in the United States who obtained it through fraud, securing 2 denaturalizations this week and filing a third case tied to alleged marriage fraud. Attorney General Pam Bondi said the actions reflect a broader push by the Trump administration to target migrants who concealed criminal conduct during the naturalization process. American citizenship is a sacred privilege, not a cheap status that can be obtained dishonestly," she said. This latest court-secured denaturalization case came on March 23rd, when a judge revoked the citizenship of Vladimir Vologath, a Ukrainian national convicted of smuggling firearm components and committing housing benefits fraud. Prosecutors said Vologath engaged in a years-long scheme beginning in 2011 to export gun parts to foreign buyers while also defrauding federal housing programs. He became a U.S. citizen in 2016, but failed to disclose his criminal activity, which the court found disqualified him from demonstrating the good moral character required for naturalization, unquote. Now think of what you can do with this. A lot of people were going nuts when Bondi said, oh, citizenship actually is not a right. And they were saying, oh, no, it is a right. Well, says who? What does that mean? Abortion was a right until it wasn't. The same people who are saying this kind of thing, oh, it's a right. They're telling us that things that we thought were core to being American, the right of free speech, the right to bear arms, actually, we don't have those. I mean, these supposed rights we enjoy everywhere. In the United Kingdom, they're getting rid of trial by jury. What's a right? There's no right to citizenship. In 1906, the Naturalization Act allowed district attorneys to denaturalize foreigners in any court having jurisdiction to naturalize aliens for the purpose of setting aside and canceling the certificate of citizenship on the ground of fraud or on the ground that such certificate of citizenship was illegally procured. Now, obviously, though the laws have changed a little bit, not too much. Not when it comes to this. Denaturalization is still something you can do. Well, what does illegally procured mean? Let's say, oh, I don't know, you deny having a criminal record. You deny you're doing crime now. You deny ties to certain groups. You deny that you are still subject to another power. You lie in your oath of allegiance, and we can prove it. I mean, Vice President J.D. Vance recently alleged that Ilhan Omar definitely committed immigration fraud, his terms. She denied it, but then she would, wouldn't she? Like, you can do a lot here. And think of what's already precedent in America. In 1952, they passed a law saying you could deport immigrants simply for supporting communism or anarchism. There's a whole category of Americans who lost citizenship because they were supposedly involved in the Third Reich. So whether you're on the hard right or the left or whatever else, like, you can do this. It has in fact been done. There is nothing stopping you from having these people gone and denaturalizing all of them once you establish the precedent that they are not real Americans like everybody else. And if we are going to need something like this, if we want to pull this off, like if we're serious, if we want remigration, it can't just be memes. It has to be like, how is this going to be done? Well, this is one way. Oh, you lied in your oath. You actually committed a crime. You actually did something immoral. You don't have good moral character. Think of what you can do with that. Well, now we're going to denaturalize you because of deceit, because of citizenship fraudulently obtained, because of ties to foreign powers. We can have a lot of fun with that. Because of security threats, because of bad moral character, because of being a drain on the state. There is precedent in American law for all of this. Mostly less than a century old. You don't have to go back to the founding generation or something. You have to go back to like the 50s. But step one, you got to get rid of birthright citizenship. And you got to end this idea that it's just a right that is given to anyone who shows up. Now, is there any hope of this? What is the case actually about? The The relevant part of the 14th Amendment is, of course, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. So the key phrase here is subject to the jurisdiction thereof. What does that mean? To use the most common example, the Japanese ambassador and his wife come to America. They have a child. Is that child an American citizen if the birth takes place in an American hospital? No, obviously not. That's absurd. They are subject to the jurisdiction of the Japanese government. Well, there are a couple cases here. One is called Elk v. Wilkins. This is from 1884. American citizenship was not extended to American Indians. What happened is there was this Indian named Elk, not surprisingly, born on a reservation. He left. He renounced his tribe. He said, I was born in America. I'm an American. And the Supreme Court said, no, you're not. Because even though you were born on American territory, you are not subject to the jurisdiction of the American government. You're part of your tribe. American Indians did not get American citizenship until Congress gave it to them in 1924. So why does this matter? One, even on American territory, even admitting America is in some sense in charge of this whole thing, meaning like the Indian reservations. Like nobody was really denying that, okay, yeah, they have some sort of sovereignty, but not really. America's still in charge. America is still the jurisdiction of these reservations. Even admitting all that, you're still not part of the country. You're not a citizen just because you were born here. You're not an American. And that only changed when you got legislation. That's a pretty important precedent here. Now, there's this other case, though. And this is the bad part. In 1894, you have this case, the United States versus Wong Kim Ark. Now, you're seeing this case everywhere now because we know which side the reporters are on. Now, this is very bad. You have this Chinese guy born in the United States to legal immigrants. That'll be important. He leaves the country, comes back. He's banned under the Chinese Exclusion Act based. He says he's a citizen, though. The Supreme Court decides 6-2 that he is. The dissent basically makes the case that we would make. He's a child of foreigners. How can he be part of the country? But the majority opinion says subject to the jurisdiction means subject to American law. Now, this is bad. I don't like this decision. But there's a very important difference between this case and the case going before the Supreme Court right now. That case, this case about this Chinese person, was about legal permanent residence. The whole defining characteristic of illegal immigrants is that they are not, in fact, subject to our jurisdiction. The whole reason for their status is that they are in defiance of it. So, this would seem not to hold here. CBS has a story. What to know about the legal fight over Trump's birthright citizenship order. Now, it's mostly incoherent wailing, but the Trump administration's argument is very accurately summarized. Quote, Solicitor General D. John Sawyer said the clause guarantees citizenship only to those who are completely subject to the nation's political jurisdiction, meaning they owe direct and immediate allegiance to the U.S. and may claim its protection. For people in the U.S. with temporary status, Sawyer argued that their children don't have sufficient ties to the U.S. and are unlikely to develop them since their parents will presumably return to their home countries. For undocumented immigrants, he said that they're by definition in violation of the law, and that defiance is inconsistent with establishing the requisite allegiance to the U.S. Sawyer wrote that the Supreme Court's decision in Wong Kim Ark recognized that the 14th Amendment guarantees citizenship to children born in the U.S. to citizens and foreign nationals with a permanent domicile and residence, or a fixed or permanent home, in the country. He claimed the executive branch has misread the citizenship clause since the mid-20th century. That misinterpretation has powerfully incentivized illegal entry into the United States and encouraged birth tourists to travel to the United States solely to acquire citizenship for their children. Unquote. Now, he also argued that this has incentivized illegal immigration and degraded the value of American citizenship. No one can seriously disagree with any of this. And I would argue that supporters of birthright citizenship support it precisely because it does those things. Now, is that an exaggeration? Am I engaging in hyperbole? I tend to do that sometimes. Well, consider the Washington Post. It's so reputable and mainstream and moderate. No, we have to take these people seriously. What's their coverage of this? Trump officials cite white supremacists in bid to end birthright citizenship. And we get from the article here, quote, Alexander Porter Morse, a Confederate officer during the Civil War and a Louisiana attorney, argued for legalized segregation in the landmark 1896 Supreme Court case that established the separate but equal doctrine and buttressed Jim Crow laws. He is again playing a key role in a monumental case to be argued before the justices Wednesday. The Trump administration has tapped Morse as an authority in its push to upend long-settled law, according to WHO, that virtually everyone born in the United States is a citizen. Over a century ago, Morse was among a trio of thinkers who spearheaded a failed effort, steeped in anti-black, notice the sacral capitalization, and anti-Chinese racism, to erase birthright citizenship. The Trump administration is reviving their arguments to make its case today, some legal scholars say. The administration is citing arguments built on a racist foundation, Justice Sadowski, an attorney for the Chinese American Legal Defense Alliance, wrote in a friend of the court brief, unquote. Now, a while back, we started out with the first immigration law ever passed by this country by the generation who wrote the Constitution. Oh, they're using a thinker who said racist things. Well, I have some bad news for you. If we're not allowed to use thinkers who are racist, the Constitution itself has to go. Which is, of course, the point. And they always play this double game, like, oh, our ideals, the country is open to everyone, everyone's an American. How can anyone take issue with these founding principles? But how dare you cite these people? Don't you know that they're evil Nazis? Don't you know that they're racist? Can't have it both ways. Either we appeal to this legitimacy of the founders or we don't. And if we appeal to the legitimacy of the founders and the Constitution, I hate to tell you guys, but they were basically white nationalists. So they're on our side. But the Post isn't complaining about Thomas Jefferson or James Madison for once. They're complaining about this guy. This is one of the guys the Post is upset about. Quote, Francis Wharton, a prominent legal scholar in the late 1800s and State Department official, was one. Wharton attempted to formulate a legal rationale that would allow citizens born to European immigrants to gain citizenship, but deny it to those of Chinese migrants. Now, again, this is exactly what the people who founded the country would have thought. You can cry about that. You can say it's immoral. You can say, oh, that's not in alignment with God or whatever, but it's not inconsistent with the founders. This is what they believed. They would have taken totally naturally here. Anyway, back to the article. He posited that a child's citizenship should be determined by parents' nationality rather than by birthplace. Wharton argued that people should have a permanent home in the United States or be domiciled here for their children to be eligible for citizenship. He wrote that the Chinese were insufficiently civilized, scare quotes, and could never obtain the proper status because they regard themselves simply as strangers and sojourners. To admit such rights to an emigrating nation would be not merely to establish a foreign sovereign, but a foreign barbarism within our national domain, Wharton wrote. He later added that the 14th Amendment's phrase, subject to the jurisdiction thereof, which was included to bar children of diplomats and other officials who owed allegiance to a foreign country from becoming citizens, prevented children born to Chinese immigrants from obtaining the status, unquote. Now again, let's look at this. Forget the scare quotes and, oh, you can't think that and everything else. How has this actually worked out? Have these kinds of racist ideas actually stood up? Have they passed the test of time? I'd say it's pretty obvious that they have. How many people are in this country right now who may have citizenship who regard themselves simply as strangers and sojourners? Is there even a question about this? We have people in Congress who openly declare that they're loyal to a foreign country before any others. Ilhan Omar in Somalia, Delia Ramirez in Guatemala. Think of the people you encounter on an everyday basis and how many are really part of an emigrating nation who established not only as foreign sovereign, but a foreign barbarism within our national domain. I mean, isn't that actually the state of our country? Isn't that the state of the West? Isn't that the entire problem? Now, the Washington Post goes on to call these xenophobic ideas, but I think they've stood up remarkably well. This guy was practically a prophet. Certainly worked out a lot better than those who thought people would come from all over the world and simply assimilate. Assimilate to what? No one assimilates. No one ever has. The nation is the people, and identity is inherent. So make no mistake about what's at stake here. If we lose the birthright citizenship case, it is a declaration that America means nothing. Things are about to get a lot harder. Something given has no value, right? If it's a right to anyone that just shows up, even those who are doing it openly, fraudulently, like these birth tourist companies that the mainstream press has been covering year after year after year. They have not been covering this up. Everybody admits this is happening. But if you say, you know what, we're just not allowed to do anything about it, then what value does American citizenship have? Why should you care about it? And that is precisely why those who militantly support birthright citizenship support it so much. It is to devalue the country on purpose as a precursor to destroying it. Everybody is right-wing about the things they actually like, right? We'll go further. Everyone wants to restrict access to the things that they love. If you have open access to something, or someone for that matter, I don't think you care about them very much. The same people who want open borders jealously guard their own ethnic groups' foundations and membership clubs and access to any particular identity. I mean, how many goofy white liberals have been exposed in recent years for trying to be black or indigenous or whatever else? If they didn't actually value these things, you'd think the minorities would be like, whatever, we're oppressed, come on in if you feel like it. But they don't. Why? Because they actually care about these things. If our country is just something to be plundered, literally by anyone, why care about it? And they don't care about it, only we do. But this only goes to a point. Like, there is a time limit here. And at some point, and we may be approaching this more rapidly than we like to admit, at some point there's no longer anything to defend. There's no scenario, for example, where America becomes less white. You hear this all the time. This is not true. There's no situation in which America becomes less white. There's only a situation in which America becomes less American. And at some point, it ceases to be America at all. Hey guys, quick reminder before we continue. You can follow Identity Politics on Rumble, Odyssey, YouTube, X, and TikTok. And if you want to make sure you never miss an episode, sign up for our email list. If you believe in this work and you want to help us stay fully independent, you can support us directly on Ko-Fi. We offer bronze, silver, gold, and white membership tiers, or you can give a one-time contribution, whatever works for you. Every bit of support helps fund production, research, and our ability to speak freely without corporate or platform pressure. All the links are in the description below. Now back to the show. Recently, I had a bonus episode for you subscribers on the Ko-Fi about the history of the NSV, which is the Flemish nationalist student fraternity that had such a big impact on me. Recently, they just hosted a major demonstration with attendees from all over Europe. Europa.com also had some great footage, which they put up on X. I'd encourage people to check that out as well. Here's a great sample. I'm really excited about this. It's a real honor. It's a tremendous honor, in fact, to have with us today the national chairman of the NSV, Tom Claeys, to talk to us about the demonstration, the struggle of European and Flemish patriots, and where the movement goes from here. I'm extremely proud he's on the show. Check it out. Well, Tom, thank you so much for joining us here today. Coming off right after this big demonstration, you must be incredibly busy. Tell us a little bit how that came to be, because, I mean, frankly, all of us in America are pretty jealous.
Well, we started preparations for the demo, I think, in July even. Small, what's the title going to be? What's the theme going to be? And then we just continue on preparing the demonstration all through September to December. And in October and November, I think we started announcing it to our foreign guests because they have to book tickets in advance. We announced the date. We're still doubting which theme we should take. But it ended up being, once again, Remigration, because when you look around in Flanders, that's the biggest issue is these people we let into our country who don't share our culture, who don't like us, who attack us and on public transport, for example, or who just cause problems for us, and they are unwilling to assimilate, for example. So we decided on Remigration because it's just the burning topic for each young person in Flanders.
What was about the attendance on your side?
It's difficult because the police would contact me because nowadays they use these drones in the sky. So they could, with AI, I don't know which AI they use for that, but they can count how many people there are at the demo. He told me it's about 1,000, 1,100. So we took that number exactly. Mm-hmm. But most of the time when the police say a number, because it was, I think if you've seen the footage, it was quite chaotic.
Yeah.
So I think he couldn't count at all what it was. So we just went with 1,100 people, which is quite believable.
Yeah. And how many leftists would you say there? Because, I mean, there were some attempts that looked like by Antifa or whoever else to try to break it up.
Yeah. I think the leftists were with about, it's difficult to say because when they were at the beginning of their march, they started giving speeches. Now, normally they start giving speeches at the end of their march, but they were doing that to wait, to let more people come. And at that moment, the police told us around 6:30, 6:25, the police told us that they had 250 to 350. So we just went with 300 for that demo. I guess maybe it's gotten larger near the evening, but most of their people, I think, because it goes to the other side of the city, to not make any confrontations between our two groups possible, they just didn't go to their own counter demo, but they went straight ahead to our demo. You had this group chat on Telegram, which was looking at where our people were. For example, you had a live update, 9 fascists. I'll close the window maybe for a second. 9 fascists are here in this pub, and it's clearly with the intent to cause violence on our supporters. And you had that all during the day. And the funny thing also I might mention is that during their start of their demonstration, it was snowing. I think it's called in English hagel, these little...
Hail?
Hail, yeah. It was hailing and raining. And during our start of the demo, I think the sun shone a little bit still. It was like sunshine, what do you call it, sunset at that moment.
Yeah. So letting us know which side God's on, which is always very important in these sorts of things.
Yeah.
Well, from what it looked like, I mean, there was definitely, I wouldn't call it violence. I mean, obviously, we've seen marches that get way more out of control and everything else, but it did look like some people were trying to start some stuff.
Yeah, it was a little bit more, I wouldn't even say it was more violent because it was a lot more last year. You had the leftists who were protected by police in a certain sense. I mean, the police are just making these barricades, which is good. I think the police did a good job with what they had, because after the demo, I also heard that they were with 30% less than last year, and both demonstrations, the counter demonstration and our demonstration and our own demonstration, they were small. They were bigger than last year, so they were with a smaller percentage of people did the police, and still they were able to de-escalate, even when there was some violence. I think when you look at the footage, it's quite clear they started, like the left wings people started to throw things, and then our people, I don't know, by the footage, I have to watch out because you never know in Belgium that they might persecute the demo.
Right.
But I think our people then threw something back, but quite quickly turned at the beginning, into violence, because it's like this giant square called the Leuven Square next to Herbert Hoover Square. And that's like a large amount of free passage for the leftists. And you can just see it even on the national television, which is quite leftist. You see this Antifa guy taking something and throwing it. So even they had to admit that it was left-wing agitators who just attacked our rally.
You know particularly which group was behind it? I mean, was there was it an Antifa? Oh,
yeah. It was Antifa Namur, Antifa Liège, which is in the south of Belgium, which I think is more left-wing, and Antifa Brussels, and I know that there were some anarchists also. For some reason, when it comes to going against us, they can work together, but when you look at like the past, I think anarchists got killed by Marxists.
Yeah, right. Spanish Civil War, we can certainly look at how those guys work together.
Yeah, that's the
so, I mean, were they not, if they're coming from the south of Belgium, I mean, were they not even Flemish then? Was it just...
I'm guessing, you don't know, of course, because I'm not state security, but I think they were from the south of Belgium, from Wallonia.
Well, that leads us to some interesting territory. I mean, obviously, and I know you got to watch yourself and everything else, but one of the things that I don't think Americans quite understand is how restrictive it can be in Europe. That things that we say all the time here and just don't even think about could get you in jail, could get you fined, could get you at least restricted in some sense. Was there ever an attempt by the government, either the local government or the national government, to just shut down the march and just say, no, you're not allowed to do this?
Shut down the march? That was
or
last
deny a permit, whatever you have to do.
No, that was okay this year in a certain sense, but last year, working together with communal services was quite annoying because the mayor of last year in Ghent, he sued me, or he put a, what do you call it in English? He sued me sort of. He started an investigation, requested an investigation into the leaflet of the demo last year for racism. So I'm being investigated for racism, for example. And that was they always try these like sideways ways to annoy us or bring us into legal troubles.
Right.
For this march, for example, I know that the commune made these leaflets, Leuven against racism, and they released it on the 23rd of March. No, our demo was the 26th.
Right.
Which I think is great because, we're also against racism, especially anti-white racism. So maybe we'll still, quote tweet them and say, thank you for standing up against
coexistence
always.
Is important.
No, but you've seen these like examples for the demo a little bit less, but oftentimes it's after the demo. I've seen that some leftist agitators are already talking about going to these like NGOs that are state sponsored, and they're going to sue for hate speech, and they'll look into that probably. And you only know when you get a letter into the mail from the police to ask you to come and speak to the police,
It does seem like these NGOs, I mean, despite the name, they really are, in some sense, almost like the governing power. I mean, they seem to be able to do things that the state itself cannot do. So there are all these legal limits, like, oh, don't worry, the state can't do this to you. And it's like, but this NGO that is funded by the state can do these things to you.
Yeah, the NGO will ask the state to do something, and then the state will say, oh, yeah, but these citizens asked us to enact this, start this investigation. And most of the time it's left wing, it's politically motivated, and it's like these practices that you will see in the Soviet Union, maybe the last time you saw that. It's just constant. There's also some other examples about hate speech that are just ridicule. For example, we have this other organization which is called the Voorpost. They stood at a place in Mechelen, which is to the north of Leuven, with a Stop Islamization banner. Just a normal thing. It's not about race. It's just about the religion and how it's encroaching power on our society, so to speak. And they got sentenced by the lower courts after an appeal. It got overturned, but they still got sentenced for just a normal banner called Stop Islamization back in, I think it was 22, 23. And it still causes you like these lawyer fines and fees of 10,000 euros, maybe even more, constantly. And it's hurting to an organization. If you have these like students like us who are manifesting, not manifesting, that's the Dutch word.
Demonstrating.
Yeah. And then you have a fine of even 250 euros, can be a lot for students.
Yeah, right. Well, how are people responding to this? Because I think what's so extraordinary from an American perspective is everybody who's getting involved in your demonstration, it did seem to be a pretty good mix of guys and girls too, knows what they're getting into, knows that the state is looking at them, knows that they're taking their pictures and that their name is going into a file somewhere. And then at some point, even if the state doesn't go after you, the Antifa scene there is a bit different than the one here. I think it's a bit more militant and a bit more physically aggressive than the one here. Here, it's mostly just trannies and reporters, basically. But they might shoot you, but they don't really attack you. But how do you get people to put themselves on the line like that, knowing that basically the government's going to be after them forever?
Well, it's a good question. I guess because people care. People want to show their voice, want to show their face, want to let themselves be heard, because people are quite tired of it. And we see it each day. This migrant illegal attacked this young girl, raped Lisa, who was just 17 years old. She just started being an adult. Just constantly you see these things and you think to yourself, like, when are we doing something, And then there is this march organized by students who are more libertine, I would say, maybe more free to do these kinds of things. And then they just say, like, let's just go there, We had everyone coming for the march when, you could look at like working class people, we had upper class people, middle class, whatever you want to call it. We even had people who were migrants themselves who came to support because they themselves think that it's gone too far, for example. And it's just, And a lot of advertising also helps, because if you do a demo like this with 200 people, I think a lot of people will be more prosecuted because it's easier to do. But if you do a demo with 1,000 people, which in Belgium or in Flanders is, in Flanders we have a population of 6.5 million, I think, was the latest figure. And I think in the US it's 320 million. If you look at it relatively, it would be, I think, a couple million that will come out in the streets than in the US. I don't know. It's, I think, 0.025% of the population of Flanders came out on the streets, which would in the US translate to, I think, 1 million. And so I'm not that good at math, but it's better to also, like, if you're going to do it professionally, do it organized, and just put out as much advertisement, propaganda, you could say, if you want to use a political term. But just keep on talking each day. People were talking about the demo. Each day we were thinking about it, putting our energy into it, if you want to say it like that. There was not a day. I have a post actually here up in my room about the demo. Each time I went to sleep, I could see it, and I was thinking, like, the more I have to do this, and this. And I'm writing it down also, So, there's a lot going on behind the scenes also, of course.
A lot of representation from people all across Europe as well. I definitely saw quite a few people. When you do these kinds of demonstrations, I mean, how often do you see the different European movements like working together like this, or is this something that's relatively new? I mean, especially because at its heart, I mean, we'll get into that in a sec, but the NSV is fundamentally about getting independence from an existing state.
That's well, people from all the journalists always ask me, like, why are you inviting foreigners to talk about remigration, which essentially is about keeping certain people out of your country and getting some of them back to their home country. Well, it's because it's a European problem, of course. So European problems require, to a certain extent, European solutions. Of course, if one state like Hungary or Poland or even Germany now, they want to send back the Syrians. From what I've read, there's a difference, of course, between saying something and doing something. But in general, we see that all over Europe, people are waking up to this problem that we have on our hands. And I hope that we can solve it in the next 10 years, because otherwise in later on in this century, I have to, of course, watch out what I say, but I think we will see more violence, we will see more problems if we don't solve this normally and peacefully, which we want to do, peacefully and democratically.
It does seem like there is a time limit here. I think Martin Sellner is given like sort of a timeline on, I think he said it's basically 15, 20 years.
Yeah.
Because at that point, then the political solution just really isn't there anymore. And at that point, you're basically Lebanon, basically, as far as the situation goes.
The political solution will probably be to have this like sectarian split up of each country, like you have the Flemish Catholics and such who form one group, and you'll have different people in those groups, but you'll have like 3-4 groups, and then they'll all band together in their own provinces, in their own pillars of society. Last 100 years, we had the Catholics, the socialists, and the liberals in 3 pillars of society, holding it all together. And now more and more, in Flanders, it's a bit different because we also had the nationalist pillar, so 4 pillars. But more and more, you'll see these like socialist liberals and such go away, and they'll be replaced by other cultures,
right?
Who just band together.
This is something which you're seeing throughout in all European politics, not so much in America, but to some extent here too, where the left, especially the left as represented by sort of the Green Party types, if you can think of them in the different countries, they have now more or less an explicit alliance with Muslims, who of course tend to believe very different things than they do on an individual basis. But they go along with it because I think they see them as allies in displacing the European culture that existed before.
Yeah.
But at some point, they themselves are going to be replaced. And I think that's when it gets really interesting, because right now the Muslims don't have the numbers in a lot of places, but in some places, like in some constituencies in Britain, they're starting to.
Yeah.
And then they're going to turn to the white left and basically say, well, we don't need you anymore. You opened up the door, but now you've outlived your usefulness. Yeah. At some point, I mean, are you just going to see the white left kind of go away in the sense that there's just not a constituency for anymore, unless they just, I don't know, convert and just try to be a part of these foreigners that are coming in?
I think maybe you'll see this like boboification of the leftist parties, which you see now already in Flanders. Is this the chairman of the party? I don't think he's ever done a honest day of work in his life. He's like this Instagram influencer, but as a politician.
Right.
He got his position because his mother was in the Socialist Party, and I think you'll just have like these bourgeois types who live in their own court. We already see it in Brussels. There's like these couple of places still in Brussels that are occupied by Flemish or Europeans, and they just live inside their own bubble, and they'll never go to the bad areas, which we all know why they're bad, of Molenbeek or Anderlecht, because then they'll get stabbed, and they know damn well that will happen. But yeah, I guess the Socialist Party will always get like enough percentage point, because I don't see necessarily, but I'm not certain, Muslims starting their own parties. I think they'll just hijack the Socialist Party, and they'll just hijack the Green Party, like we saw in, I think it was Great Britain. Reform lost to the Green Party, and it was a Muslim, I think, that did it.
It was a white lady who won, but it was Muslim voters, basically.
They ganged up. They made their wives vote how they told them to vote, which is, I think, illegal in British law, for example. And we'll see that more.
Apply to them. I mean, we all kind of know how that goes.
Yeah, that's true too.
What I was going to say was, one of the things that I guess Americans probably don't quite understand is you've got, with the NSV, this is, of course, a nationalist student fraternity. Now, of course, we have fraternities here too, but they don't really have political overtones. Yeah. I mean, if you join whatever Greek group, I was in a fraternity, I mean, it's basically just a drinking club, and that's it. That's what you do. But there, I mean, it's not just that you have national student fraternities. My understanding is that you have religious ones, the leftists have their own political fraternities and everything else. Yeah. Has there ever been an attempt by the state or even by the school system to basically drive you guys out, to shut it down, to say that we're going to get rid of this?
Yeah. It actually happened when I was president of the Leuven chapter. We did a lecture with Dries van Langenhoven. I don't know if you know him.
Yes.
And in the lecture, I think I'm not going to debate about whether it was racist or not, but it was stamped as such. And then we lost our, I don't know how we can call it in English, but our recognition, like you're recognized by university.
Yeah, your charter, I guess is what you would call it here, yeah.
And then we lost that after, like, they didn't even talk to us. The dean of the university called me while I was out in a shop buying White Monster. This is a real story. I was
Let's see it.
Great.
Choice of a new generation, right?
Yeah. And I think I didn't pick up the phone because it's like a strange number. I'm like, still actually a bit hungover from, like, sleep tired from last night.
So it's also a drinking club, but it's a drinking club with other things as opposed to the
and that's maybe sometimes the hard part. Like, you have to encourage students to go out and leaflet, and you have to encourage them to go out and do actions. And you also basically have to be on guard not to let it turn into a drinking club, which doesn't happen, like, hasn't happened. But you never know, you still have to keep a certain standard. And if you are saying to your students or to your club members, like, don't be drinking out this late and don't be doing this, and you're doing it yourself, then I can see it for sure that it will go down as a club. And I've seen that happen.
How many chapters are there now at this point?
Six
chapters
that are alive. There are actually 8 in total, but I decided to change the West Flanders chapter into Kortrijk, which is a city in itself. So because the chapter was like 3 places at the same time in one province. And for students, it's quite impossible to do that, especially nowadays, because they like almost ban you from having a driver's license. Like, the minister of NVA has made it so difficult to have a driver's license that now you have to jump out to all these hoops that a lot of young people don't have them until they're like 21, sometimes even 25. So we decided to do it in one city, and then we have Brussels, Ghent, Antwerp, Leuven, which was where the demo was, and then Hasselt. So that's 6 active ones.
I suppose one of the feelings of, envy, to be blunt. I mean, when you look at it from an American perspective, there's not really, there's political clubs, obviously, everybody knows that, and you can do that, but there's not really a nationalist subculture on the campuses in quite the same way. There is one now in the country. You definitely see that, and that's very different from what existed even 15 years ago.
Yeah.
But you don't have, like, formal institutions on campuses. You just sort of have college Republicans, Turning Point, whatever. But you don't have something that's been around for a long time where you see guys come up in it and then decades later they're in city council or something like that. What would you say, is this sort of model transferable to other countries? I believe that what you guys have going is partially based on, like, the German student fraternities too.
Yeah, the Burschenschaften,
Right. Which were kind of like an underground that's the stashes, and they were kind of like an underground nationalist thing, right? They kind of sprung up after Napoleon.
Liberal nationalists, because liberal used to be something else.
1848 and all that, right?
They were exactly, I think it's gonna sound maybe a bit not schizophrenic but crazy what I'm about to say, but it's like oppression is, I think, a little bit good for a student group, because you're inside this, like, club, and you're inside this thing that other people don't really get to experience. So I think to a certain, I have to watch out what I say, of course, because I might be inviting it over. But,
we'll show, oppression's a good thing. We'll show you.
I have to. I'm not to be arrogant. I hope I don't get to experience any more troubles with NSV, of course. But I think to a certain extent, students are adaptable. If we are not allowed to wear this anymore, we'll just put it out. Not put it on, and then we'll just go and leaflet without it. If the university bans us, we'll just meet up clandestinely. If we get banned by the state, our IDs aren't banned. It's just the structure is banned. But you can't ban an ID whose time has come, I think, is the quote. I think there is room for it in the United States, because I think that was your question. My apologies. I think there is room for it in the United States, but then Republicans have to learn not to disassociate with young students who make mistakes. For example, the New York Republicans, I didn't catch everything about it, but I did see that certain figures started pushing the students who made, stupid jokes, vile jokes. I don't know what the exact detail, but they make jokes and it happens. They make a meme. I'm not going to judge anybody. I'm not I'm not a saint. But if you push a student and young people immediately under the bus, I think the college Republicans of Texas didn't do that. And they're doing the right approach. Like, that's the right approach you have to take. You shouldn't disassociate from people just because they make a bad joke.
Right.
Then you'll never have young people in your movement. Do you think the left does that? Do you think the left pushes over other people because they smashed someone with a hammer? No. And these are words. They're not even deeds. Left-wing people, they'll take a hammer and smash someone in Hungary, and they'll stand up in the parliament and say, "Oh, siamo tutti antifascisti," this and that. It's crazy. And we have people in the Republican Party who disassociate from young guys because they made a joke. It's totally insane.
Right.
I think that the Americans in the Republican Party have to learn that, not to immediately push young people to the side because they said something stupid. You have to learn.
You would think they would have learned something from the last decade, but you'd be mistaken, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's also a thing about Trump, I think. If he goes, then I think we spoke about this. And if he goes, then it's just back to the Bush era, probably. I don't know what your opinion is on that.
Yeah, probably. I mean, you could argue that younger activists coming up have a much more radical take on these things, but it's made very little impact on the people in charge of the party. And there's not really a centralized party structure the same way there is in Europe, but your local guys in state legislatures, in Congress, and the Senate, they could just be there 20 years ago. Yeah. I mean, they haven't changed their positions on anything.
Okay.
I mean, basically we have Trump and then that's it. I mean, nobody really knows what happens after that. In terms of what's going on with Belgium specifically, and I don't know how much you can talk about it, but I mean, fundamentally, even before remigration, obviously the movement was about Flemish independence.
Yeah.
And every once in a while, it seems like in Belgium, the government collapses or there is no government or something because Flemish and the Walloons can't get together and figure something out. Does it seem like the drive for independence has stalled somewhat? Or do you think that, no, it's still going to happen and it's going to happen sooner rather than later?
I think I hope it's going to happen rather sooner than later, but we have to be realistic. I think the main issue is that you have two main, I'll explain it for your listeners. I know that you know how it works. The two main parties, you have the NVA, which is the New Flemish Alliance, and Vlaams Belang, which is translated to Flemish Interests. What you have is the NVA just constantly giving in to French-speaking demands, giving in to liberal parties just to have a seat at the table. And I think that's one of their main issues.
The Republican Party of the Flemish movement, basically.
There's like a big tent party, and they have a seat at the table, but they don't do anything with it, and they push actually the Flemish independence to the side. Yeah, that's one of the things I think a lot of foreigners, in Europe and the West don't understand, is that we Flemish do want our independence. We want our own state, maybe even to reunite with the Netherlands. I think that's, thank you for mentioning that, because it's often, we have to push remigration, and immigration is the most important thing right now. But Flemish independence would make that a lot more easy for us if we had our own state, for example.
Right. I mean, I guess the model would be if you get, it doesn't work this way, I know, but is the understanding that if you can get independence first, then remigration becomes easier because you'll have command of a state and then you can just do this sort of thing. Whereas now, like the Wallonians just would prevent it.
Yeah. They vote left wing, like structurally. I think even now in the polling, now we have a sort of right wing government with, it's called a maire mouvement reformation, I think it was. Which means Reformation Movement, MR. They're like liberal, a bit more right. I wouldn't even call them right wing, to be honest. But there are some figures in it that wouldn't be called right wing. And they are already losing in the polls. And the Socialist Party and the Communist Party are already going back up. So It's just structurally and culturally that the Walloons or the French-speaking are more left-wing. And we want them to be able to decide what they want to do, and we need to be able to decide what we want to do. That wouldn't be the best solution. And there are it's not like we'll separate on a Catalonian basis. Like in Catalonia, when you had the attempt to independence, they had a lot of violence, like the police came in and added people. We can just vote, and then you have these articles in the UN that you can use. You'll still be a part of all of the treaties, because that's the biggest, it's always these judicial arguments against it, but you can just keep being a part of all the trade deals you've made, and you can separate the state debt also on basis of how many citizens you have per capita. That would not be difficult to do at all. Right. And that would be rights for French-speaking people. Like these leftists, they always say, you're going to start genociding people or ethnociding people in Brussels, which is crazy.
I mean, we saw it happen with Czechoslovakia. I mean, it wasn't that long ago. I mean, they just did it, and nobody's like, oh, Czechia and Slovakia, they're just hellholes now. They're perfectly fine. They don't even particularly dislike each other. They get along fine.
Yeah, they get along really well, and I think it was the Polish region of the two that asked for independence in that case. So it was a lot more easier, but it doesn't matter even, the economic side of things is one of the reasons we want independence, but also culturally, we'll just be able to get more along because we just have the same ideas about what has to happen in the country.
Was there any Dutch representation at the recent demonstration?
Yeah.
I know every once in a while, I think it was, I'm trying to remember, but I think Wilders might have said something along the line, he might have been joking, but he said something like a minister for reunification or something if he ever took over, the idea of a greater Netherlands or something, which of course would be pretty cool.
Our prime minister, actually, Bart de Wever from the NVA, said that he wants to see a reunited Netherlands again. Flanders and the Netherlands going back together. Yeah. So even and he's the prime minister. So.
Yeah, and he's but I guess, is there anything specific that you can look toward to make this happen? Is there any attempt, like here in North America, for example, Alberta, province of Canada, some people there want independence, so they're doing signatures now to try to get a referendum. Is there any attempt to try to get a referendum to actually decide this issue, or is it just kind of waiting for something to happen?
Well, I think it's important that both Flemish national parties get to 50%. And I think that's something I can say publicly. If they get 50%, they will be looking at either the NVA version of confederalism, which is we still have the Belgian state, but we're only doing defense and what's the second thing? Defense and diplomatic recognition, which is also a story because diplomacy in Belgium, all the diplomatic schools were always filled with French-speaking people, which is the reason that everybody thinks that Belgium is a French-speaking country, which it isn't. 65%, 60% of everyone in Belgium speaks Flemish. And because of those kind of things. But we want, of course, independence and then reunification with the Netherlands. And I think that if those two parties get 50%, then we'll be able to make it happen.
When's the next election where that could be a possibility?
29.
Yeah. Okay, so that's the thing to look at.
Yeah.
When Quebec tried to get independence, it was back in the 90s, they lost by a little bit, and it was because the immigrant populations that had been brought in, some of whom spoke French, but they're like Haitians and stuff. They're not Quebecois, obviously.
Yeah.
They were the margin that prevented it from happening. And the Quebec independence leader, he got in trouble for saying this, but he famously said, we lost because of money and the ethnic vote.
Yeah.
Do you think that this is maybe one of the motivations for why these people are being brought in? Because you have to, I mean, I've been to Brussels, and it was a long time ago. I imagine it's worse now. There are a lot of non-Europeans there. And
they all vote against some.
They will not vote. They will not support independence.
Yeah, this is quite statistically proven that Moroccan communities, Turkish communities, they all vote left-wing. And that's why they keep importing them. And also a lot of African communities tend to speak more French, which is fine. But then they come to Flanders and they bring their French with them, and sometimes they'll refuse to learn Dutch, which just enhances this francophonisation, this Frenchifying of the countryside around Brussels, which we then call the Brussels. We call it the oil stain. Like it's a stain on the country because it's just like all of them speak French and they get granted these rights to have their papers in French, and that doesn't make an incentive to learn the language.
Right. I mean, Brussels used to be a Flemish city. I mean, ideally an independent. That would probably be like the biggest, not to get ahead of ourselves, but like if you pull it off and you get independence, I mean, the big fight is probably going to be what happens to Brussels.
Yeah. Well, probably it'll be, a region with 2 languages. That's unavoidable. What you would have is then minority rights. You can't do anything otherwise, but it is Flemish ground. And it is part of Flanders. We're not going to discuss that. It's still ours. It's even now you can see that it's starting to get more and more English. I don't know how to say it in English, but more and more people are speaking English instead of French. Like the new people who are coming in, they all speak English, and then you have more and more this like internationalization. And then the French-speaking people are complaining about that, so it's quite the irony. So it's just an anecdote.
I mean, at least it's a Germanic language, right? I mean, it's closer to that.
It's a lot closer, but at the same time, internationals do bring their own set of problems. Like we're not going to start giving out papers in English. You have to learn the language.
This, I guess, is a question you alluded to before, and you probably get it a lot, but it's something, especially for Americans, to kind of think through some of these problems. A lot of people are going to try to be clever and say, how can you support independence and even talk about being separate from European French speakers, fellow Belgians, one might say, but at the same time say, look, it's a European problem. We're talking about remigration. Is there a contradiction between being a patriot of Europe and also being a separatist?
I don't think so. I don't think so because you're still able to, when you have your own state, your own people, to work together with other people. I don't think one separates the other. In fact, it's even easier to cooperate with who you want when you have your own state. I think that might be the best answer. And I want to still answer one of your questions. You said, how can you bring up the separation of fans? How can you make it a reality? Also, this interview is a part of that. If I'm speaking to American audiences on the right or on the left about the Flemish cause, and I'm already bringing awareness to it to foreigners. Foreigners might be the bad word, but to other people outside of Flanders, because I've had commentary from people like these people in Germany, France, Spain, they don't know anything about the Flemish cause, and you can't explain it to them because they'll think about their own countries where they have also separatist things. But it's quite important that we bring consciousness to, that people know about the Flemish cause. And this interview helps with that. So thank you for asking those questions also. To go back to the European question, I think one doesn't necessarily exclude the other. I don't want Wallonia. I have some French-speaking people that I know, and even partially family members. I don't want Wallonia to necessarily turn into Pakistan or into whatever kind of immigrant group they decide to let in. They have to stay a certain amount. Wallonian majoritarian or something,
Right.
If France doesn't,
you think they would just join France?
Yeah.
If Belgium broke up?
I don't know if France would want them, to be honest, because they have a lot of debt per person. It's quite, it sounds like a joke, but I think the France would take them, but I don't know. That's too difficult to say. It's the world is full of unknowns. So I think your American previous vice president said that they are unknown unknowns, and that's an unknown unknown.
Secretary of Defense, Roosevelt. He said there are known knowns and there are known unknowns, but there are also unknown unknowns, which everybody makes fun of him for, but that's actually a pretty good point.
It's quite a good point.
He's right.
Yeah.
Well, speaking about America and everything else, when you said, bring it to the attention of Americans, you never know. President Trump could see it and he might start talking crazy and talking about American military intervention to do God knows what. But that might do more harm than good. And I guess that's my next question is, for a while there, especially 2015, 2016, you had this sense of, call it like a populist international. You had all these movements kind of arising in all these different states at once. And now Trump is back in power, and you have sort of these movements in other states. Trump right now is backing Orban in Hungary. He's publicly endorsed him. There was a time when foreigners really wouldn't endorse other foreign leaders, but I guess we're past that. But Orban does not seem to be doing very well in the polls. And certainly with what's happening with Iran, President Trump is probably unpopular in a lot of areas where he may have been more popular before. So the question becomes, does the European nationalist movements, I should say, in all these different countries, do they really need to separate themselves from what's happening in America? Because, I mean, are we basically being an anchor dragging you guys down?
It's a difficult question to answer. I think it varies by case. I don't think Orban, and it's not going to make me popular what I'm now going to say, but I think Orban is shooting himself in the foot with all of his, even I know that he has some corruption scandals. But in general, like there are so many international agitators also working in Hungary to stop him. Like I saw this Instagram reel. I don't know if you ever see those, but you have these like short clips, and it's like a green politician from, I think, the Netherlands or from Flanders, who is going now this week or last week. She went to Hungary, and she's staying there until I think it's the 12th of April or the 14th. I think their elections are the 12th of April. It's a Sunday, and they're just agitating in another country. So I don't think we should separate completely from the US, because still Europeans are still living in the United States of America, even if it's only 50%. But I don't think we should support blindly Trump's causes, because they're not ours. It's not our war.
Yeah.
It's not our business. It's a difficult question. I think that it will be unwise to just push aside everyone on the right in America because of a war in another country. But the causes won't be popular. Let's say the effects from this war are going to be disastrous. And we have to stay away as far as possible from those effects, because they're not our decision.
Right.
And the gas prices and such.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's starting to bite here, too, but we'll see how much longer this goes on.
I think Trump will probably ban exports to Europe, but I'm not a magician. I can't speak in Washington.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the things. President Trump has sort of reoriented a lot of North American defense policy toward North America. There was this statement, actually, that Secretary of War came out with where they talked about this greater North America type vision. But we're basically going to build up the empire here. And, obviously you saw what we did in Venezuela and everything else. And that seems to be the priority. And of course, that seems to be not maybe giving as much aid or being as friendly to Europe as we've been in the past. On the other hand, I mean, you saw Rubio came over there and basically defined America, Marco Rubio of all people, defining America as like a European country and everything else, which was received pretty well.
Well, it's difficult because you have Martin saying, for example, that all Europeans are now living in sort of quasi-Soviet Union, where every single humiliation that our European leaders are getting is good for us, because we want them to get humiliated, because they humiliate us with the anti-racist laws.
Right.
Or race laws, you could call them also, with constant police searches for just minor Facebook posts or tweets. I think it's double, because a lot of the boomers, and I would say like normal constituents, so to speak, like not people who are just set in stone right wing, I think they really don't like this encroachment on European politics from Trump's side. But at the same time, I think who said it? I think it was Guillaume Faye who said it, 85% of the people will follow what 5% on the edges just say. So if we just take along everyone, they will still follow.
Yeah, I think that's right. But I guess that brings us to the next point, which is the larger question of what the European Union has to say about all this. I mean, obviously, in Hungary, I think we all know
they're funding the other groups.
The thumb is on the scales. Is that election? And we saw what
even
happened.
more so. I think they'll if Orban does win, they'll probably cancel the election. They'll say like, this is voting fraud. Our independent counters noticed this and this, And who knows, maybe something will happen. You never know. Maybe in, what is it, 2 weeks? In 2 weeks, we'll see that the military is on the streets. Yeah. The military is on the streets. Who knows?
Yeah.
You can't predict that.
And you also still have what's going on with Ukraine and everything else that's just staggering on and everything else. It does seem like the European Union, the leadership of it, it's remarkable to me how little they've actually changed their position on anything in this remarkable 10, 15 years that we've had. I mean, they still sound like they're doing the exact same thing. And the question has to be, and this gets, I guess, to the larger question of, do you want to be in the system or like smash the system or radically change the system? Is the European Union just this thing that can be taken over and essentially turn to our benefit, or is it inherently flawed and it has to go down? Like, basically, if you get an independent Flanders, does an independent Flanders leave the European Union? Does it do its own Brexit?
Good question. Really good question. I think there's both sides to this. And NSV doesn't really have a position. NSV does have a position which is anti-European. But the difficult thing is that, of course, we're walls in between, like China, Russia, and the United States. And you have to have some kind of European cooperation, or you're never going to get, I think you'll get divided and conquered. But I do think we should have like a confederacy of European states. And I think that the structure that's now in place of the European Union is just rotten to the core. And like you say, they're still going on with the same decisions. Normal people are paying for it. And it's like the people at the Titanic who are playing their violence and just going to die, so to speak. Metaphorically, of course. I'm not saying that political leaders have to die. I just add that there before I get another investigation into things that I say on this podcast.
Yeah, edit that part out. Yeah, right. But I guess what's remarkable to me is when I look at Belgium. I'm not trying to dunk on the Belgian government. It'd be a strange thing for an American to be really angry about Belgium, but somehow it does. When you look at Belgium, when you look at the way it's set up, it almost, to me, seems like this European Union in miniature. Because, you can imagine a based European Union, right? Like, you can imagine a European Union that actually is pro-Europe. Yeah. And this is not it. And I remember, like, when I visited Belgium the first time, you can see, I think it was the Senate or something. Yeah, like the way you have like the pictures of all these like great leaders and everything else from the past, and it's just like, oh, okay, like this is what a national legislature should look like. It's strong, it's powerful, it's rooted in history and identity. And then you see like the other parts, and it's just this sort of, it looks like an Apple store. It's like a corporate whatever. And it almost seems like the people who defend Belgian unity, and I've heard this explicitly, they say it is important for Belgium to stay united because we have no culture. Because we have no identity, because like this is a place for everybody. And it's sort of like that's how the European Union is defended, where it's basically the EU is great because it's almost like a model for global government in a way. It's just a question of technocratic managing in the economy. And of course, they're not even really good at that. I mean, you look at the European Union's economy compared to America over the last 20 years. Not that things in here are so great, but it's done a lot better here than what it has there.
European entrepreneurs are just wrong at every single site. You have to have environmental regulations, which are completely crazy. Nobody follows them outside of the European Union. I think you had this plant in Antwerp, this chemical plant, who was supposed to open in Antwerp with all the like good regulations. But I think the cost of gas went up. It was last month. I don't know the details. But at the end, they decided to move all of it to China, not even consider Antwerp. And China doesn't have environmental regulations like we do. So what are you doing? You're exporting all your environmental CO2 or even like, or chemical spills to China, which is, I think, also a bit irresponsible. If you want to talk about racism, maybe those environmental regulations are racism, because who gets to pay the bill? The Chinese farmer whose farm gets destroyed by chemical stuff, solutions. And I guess, to your point about Belgium being a sort of European Union, I think that's one of the reasons that they won't let Belgium split, because I think there was a documentary back in 2011, 2010, that said that Belgium is like an extrapolation of the European Union, or like the European Union is an extrapolation of Belgium. That if Belgium fails, 3 languages, Western European languages. Lots of immigration of everyone, and in the center of Europe also, and every single EU institution is in Brussels, or at least most of them, except for maybe the Parliament, which is also in Strasbourg, and ECB. But a lot of the institutions are in Brussels. So if Belgium fails, then it's like the European Union also fails, even though it has been failing the last 10 years since the refugee crisis. And so, like your point said about the economy, since 2008, it's been like this. It's not recovered at all, the European economies, because you have all these regulations that they keep adding on each after another. Even I have some experience, with being self-employed, and I have to put in these like large legal bindings about what I do with your data, which American competitors for the same age don't have to do. And they go up like this, and I have to do like this, which is
right. Yeah. I mean, it's one of these things. Obviously, the American right, such as it is, tends to be what you guys would call liberal. Classical liberal, economic liberal. The American right until recently has been very pro-capitalist compared to the European right, I would say. But I mean, there are some benefits that come with that, which is, of course, when you look at the European Union, sometimes people will say things like, oh, well, they see Europe as an economy. And it's like, well, they're not even doing a good job managing the economy. Like, what is the point of this thing at this point? And it seems to be like, I have a hard time thinking what the European Union is even for at this point, other than basically preventing anyone from stopping immigration. Like that seems to be like the purpose of a system is what it does. Yeah, that's what it does.
It does seem to me that also to be the case. I do have to add to that, like we don't mind social security and things like that. We are a solidarist student union, so we're not like you have to throw everything about and then just be completely pro-capitalist. But it does seem to me that we've gone too far in all the rules and in all the things that it's just like these leftist green parties have been kamikazing onto the economy and just they've actually made, like it's what Draghi said, I think, they've been making environmental laws without, they have an environmental policy without having an industrial policy. So we've killed our entire industry, not thought about anything else. And even when it comes to like the European Union stepping in, they don't do that. So exactly. The system is what it does. The system is what it does, and I think immigration and just killing European economics seems to be the modus operandi right now.
Right. I mean, the Germans blowing up their nuclear plants and stuff. I mean, that was just like, what are you doing? Yeah. But in terms of
the chancellor, the chancellor who did it, he got a seat. All those chancellors. There's a good article about it. I won't plagiarize it, but I'll send it to you if you want. It's about how all of these like green ministers. I think our Stine van der Straten got a job at a lobbying firm, which is being paid by gas companies or something. A solar firm. So there's something not good there. And the chancellor of I think it was Germany back in the 2000 before Merkel got a board seat at Gazprom. I don't know the name of the station
Russian,
right now.
Right? Yeah,
and the Russian. Maybe it's context that Gazprom is the Russian gas delivery company, the biggest one because it's a state company. I think it's 51%.
Yeah, this is something that a lot of people I think don't quite get. You see with immigration too, which of course is the main thing. Like these refugee resettlement groups, often
they all get money
here in America. They get a ton of money, and the guys working for these things. Yeah, they're making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. All their expenses are dumped on the taxpayer, and then people are like, "Oh, it's suicidal empathy." Like it's not empathy at all; it's greed. I mean, it's material self-interest.
It's these lawyers who just keep on. You'll come into Belgium, you'll get you're an asylum seeker. Come into Belgium, you're not a real one, but you ask for a permit and gets denied. You have 30 days to do an appeal. You wait until the 30th day to do appeal. And it's these lawyers who just take it on for you, and they just keep on. And there's like this, there was this case about this, I think it was a Ghanaian family, from Ghana, Africa. And they were here. He met his wife here, which was also illegal. And they just kept in these procedures until they were 18 years in the country. They had a kid, was 17 years in the country. So it's just inhumane to keep the system floating. We have to abolish it. And the people who do enact it have to pay penalties or maybe even go to jail.
Right. Well, when we think about remigration, at some point we have to think, because obviously this is the goal, and this is the goal in America too, but we have to think about what does that actually look like and how can we pull it off? Because the American situation right now is this. Illegal immigration has basically stopped under Trump. He stopped it cold.
Yeah.
And you have more people leaving than coming in, which is good. Sometimes people will say things like, oh, he's increasing legal immigration. That's actually not true. He's decreasing that too. Supreme Court is going to decide birthright citizenship. All that is good. But when it comes to mass deportations, a lot of people have left, but a lot more need to go. And the question becomes, if you look at what happened with ICE in Minnesota and you look at some of the other operations, the question becomes, do the American people have the stomach to do what is necessary to get these people to leave? Because sometimes these people are not going to want to leave. Now, if you look at the polls, 54% of Americans still want all illegal immigrants gone. But are they willing to see federal officers marching through their cities and doing all this kind of stuff? Because as we saw in Minnesota, a lot of people get very mad about that. And sometimes there's violence and sometimes bad things happen. When you think about remigration, assume things go great. You get you get the independent Republic of Flanders, you get, the nationalist majority, you're in charge. You are now in charge of remigration. How does one do it without creating the sort of optical problems that lead to the situation we have here? Or do you just have to step over that?
I think, honestly, you just have to step over it. I think, you have to stomach it and just keep on going, because otherwise you'll lose. And I think what you should also do as a right-wing government is just, how do you say it, get rid of your enemies in a certain sense, like stop funding these NGOs. There's a good
that's a big point. Yeah.
There's a good Twitter account called Small Data Republican, I think it was.
Yeah, Data Republican. I think that's it. Yeah.
In June,
it's crazy how much we fund them.
They made a big list of the No Kings protests. Why haven't you gotten rid of all those federal funding things? Is it because the Republicans block you? Then get rid of those Republicans blocking you. So it's not easy, of course, to do, but it is simple. I think you also have to get rid of the agitators, because all of those people around the ICE just honking constantly and filming, either get them arrested because they're like making a public nuisance. I think the left will do the same thing. If you go to visit the border, I think back in 2014 or 12, Alex Jones did that, and Border Patrol immediately went to him. I think some right-wing figure did that, and they started harassing him. And it's just constantly like, if the left has power, they use it. It's like this immediately, they just use it. And we are just afraid to use our power, but we should be using it more. This will probably be taken out of context, but I don't care. It's like these NGOs, they have to be stripped of their funding. Like, if you want to do political activism, do it like us on your own dime. And the people who are doing it, if they do anything illegal, prosecute them, because they are doing oftentimes legal things. They just don't get prosecuted by these DAs. And I think in the United States, you also have to get rid of these DAs that are politically appointed and paid for by Soros, also those kinds of things. So you have to go to the root of the cause also to get the remigration possible, which is also the left-wing apparatus and the industry. I think that's one of the.
I was going to say, you're absolutely right. How often one of the things that's so frustrating on the right is there will never be a point, unless we win, of course. There will never be a point where the government is like funding me, like subsidizing identity. But to even say it is just hilarious. But if you are on the left, you just take it for granted that everything that you do,
I think it'll change.
Funded by the taxpayers.
Yeah, I think the tide is turning even on that front. Like, when you look at the counter demo last week, they were with not a lot of people, and now people are just waking up, and you have these like. Normally, I have to distance myself from those kinds of groups. But you have hooligans in football, people who come to the demo. And I don't like it if they cause violence, but they did come and, they work on, which they didn't back in the day, like in the 2000s. I don't think they did that. So you have normal people just coming on the streets, and you have these, and that makes it bigger and bigger, and people will outnumber them. After a while, you'll start to see it also in their activism, that they'll be outnumbered, and then also weaken and weaken. Thinking on that side, we will be winning.
Yeah, they do seem demoralized in some sense. The numbers definitely are starting to turn on our side, which is something very different than what you had not too long ago.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah, me too. I think that's a good place to end it. I mean, I think there's definitely been some huge momentum going forward. So I guess the next question should be obviously the last question. What's coming up next for European nationalists? I know there's the Remigration Summit in Portugal, I think.
Yeah.
But do you see any other big demonstrations on the horizon? Is there any political thing like an election that you're mobilizing for now? Because unfortunately, as we've talked about, I mean, I know we're optimistic and things are getting better in some sense. There is a time limit here. And if we don't pull it off in the next 10 years, we're going to be in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, I tend to not really speak about our goals because it's quite a good tip.
Yeah,
maybe. And it gives you like the same dopamine as doing them. But I do know that in the coming months, we'll be going to Politicizing, which is a great event. I would highly recommend Americans to also come. I do know that prices for airplane tickets are quite expensive right now, but I would recommend coming to Rhode, which is in Porto. And I also have in July, we have the 11th of July, that's our independence, or it's not our Independence Day, but it's a commemoration of the Flemish community. Right. And then in July, we have probably the Remigration demo in Vienna. That's organized by Martin Zellner. I think it's always in the weekend of the 20th, 22nd, somewhere there. Normally it's always in July. I haven't heard anything yet. I think it'll probably be the 25th then this year, the 24th, something like that. It's always in the weekend at the end of July. Maybe it's the 18th of July. That's also something we're going to. And hopefully in the future we'll see a remigration march in France, also Netherlands.
Yeah, the French elections coming up. I mean, I think that's probably the big
one also. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I know the whole point of the movement is to be separate from the French speakers, but nonetheless, I mean, from a European perspective, it does seem like, what do they say? France sneezes, Europe catches cold. I mean, if you had to pick like one country where if you win a national election, the whole thing just turns on a dime, it's France.
Yeah. When it rains in Paris, it dribbles in Brussels, they say. So it's the same as what you said a bit. It is indeed when, especially the Walloons, they look a lot at France, like what happens there. And the socialists here in Wallonia are quite scared because socialists in France started losing, and then the PTB, which is the Communist Party, started gaining in Wallonia at the same time. So they do look at France. And I think it'll be quite hefty, the amount of judicial response that France will get, like Iryna will get before 27. I can see it happening that one of them goes to jail, for example.
Will definitely.
Like Sarkozy is now in jail, but it's like a luxury jail, and I think he did deserve it. I don't know what the case was. I haven't read it, but right. He's like this slimy old bastard with Libyan money, and he was this like this conservative ink type of guy who just.
The center right, right? They never change. It's the same in every country.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's also a Brussels thing or a Belgian thing, like this corruption. That's also in the European Union now. Yet, I think it was the socialists who got a big bag of money from the Qataris. That's the same thing that happens in Belgium. There's like these. We now have a Ministry of Health who got a lot of money for helicopters, and he just started burning it. We call it black money, but it's under the table money, zwartgeld. They just started burning it in his wooden stove. And then he said, but what am I otherwise going to do with it? I didn't know it was bad money. Completely crazy. And then he gets a minister post again, 20 years later. So that's the same thing what happens in the European Union. It's like you take it from Belgium and it goes to the European Union. It's the same thing.
Yeah, that's the biggest problem, I guess, that we have, is that the other side is essentially getting paid with our money, and so it's so much harder for us to overcome it. But it does seem like we are overcoming them.
Yeah.
And last question then, in terms of your leadership of the NSV, or NSV, I should say, do you see a surge in recruitment? Because obviously you're dealing with all this repression and everything else, but I mean, the turnout was really impressive. And the fact that you have people, I mean, nobody who gets involved in this movement now, and this is a big difference from how it was 15 years ago, somebody could be like naive and they could say, oh, I'm excited about this. I'm joining, but you don't really know what you're signing up for. If you get involved in this thing now, you know what you're signing up for.
Yeah.
Like, you know, they're going to come after you, but people show up anyway.
Yeah, because it's also like we make it quite clear to our members, like you don't have to get on camera. You don't have to be a front-facing member. You can still get a doctorate degree even in Belgium if you are a member of ours, because we just won't publicly announce you. So that's, I think, also one of the differences to other people. Like you can still be a member and not be that front-facing and still be active. That's maybe one of the things that's also good about student group. And I see that in France, they do the same thing. Like sometimes they'll hold up a leaflet in front of their face if you don't want to be screwed over in your faculty, which is quite left-wing, of course.
Right. All right.
So we do have a lot of members.
Thank you so much for joining us today. If you had one last thing that you wanted to say to an American audience that maybe does not know that much about the Flemish struggle or about your group or anything else, what would you tell them?
We are quite a hospitable people, so if you ever visit, just send us a message.
All right.
And we'll receive you.
To a white monster in independent Flanders.
Yeah,
so, thank you so much.
Thank you. Good.
Een nieuwe tijd. Een tijd waarin Vlamingen, Nederlanders, Europeanen zich niet langer hoeven te schamen om te zijn wie zij zijn. Een tijd waarin de Europese volkeren hun cultuur en beschavingsbesef herwinnen en durven te verdedigen wat in ons is: Europa.
We eisen remigratie, we eisen een eind aan deze multiculturele nachtmerrie, we eisen een eind aan al die islamitische aanslagen zoals die 10 jaar geleden in Brussel.
We have a right to have our own homeland. We have a right to be free. Keep going, keep acting, keep fighting, and victory will be ours!
So, a few months ago, we had the death of Iryna Zarutska, murder that basically transfixed the entire country, and there was a project announced in the aftermath to put up murals of her all around the country. One was in Providence, Rhode Island. This has been the reaction.
Well, Emily, Jean, it's still here, but not for long. Artist Iryna Zarutska tells me he's sad it's come to this point, but after calls from Mayor Smiley and other local leaders to remove the mural, it felt like only a matter of time before this happened.
The artwork is going to be removed.
Artist Iryna Zarutska breaking the news to NBC 10 Monday afternoon. The Iryna Zarutska mural is coming down.
A lot of people voiced their frustrations, and voices were heard, and the work is coming down as a reaction to that.
The mayor of Providence specifically condemned it, of course, and here you have State Representative David Morales, I wonder what his stake is in all this, commenting on it.
Ultimately, we want to make sure that every community member that calls Providence home feels safe, and we can both agree that this mural behind us does not reflect Providence's values, nor does it reflect the creativity that we want to see in our city.
And the thing is, he's right. Like, this actually does not reflect their values. What are their values? A couple episodes back, we talked about this study on morality that showed liberals have essentially a set paradigm in their head about who's allowed to be a victim and who is not. And it's remarkably consistent. You know, you see somebody get murdered, right? A conservative will look, and this isn't me saying this is backed up by the data. A conservative will look at a particular case, somebody gets murdered, and they're going to say, well, this is the person who was clearly victimized. It doesn't matter what sex they are, it doesn't matter what race they are, it doesn't matter how much money they had. Like, this is what happened, this is the case, and this is how I'm going to approach any legal consequences from it. Leftists don't do that. They have the progressive stack, basically, in all situations. If a black man attacks a white woman, the white woman cannot be the victim. Politically, that cannot be allowed to be recognized. Like, the most you're going to get from them is like, this was a one-off, it's random, what can you do? It's a tragedy, it's unfortunate, like an earthquake might be, but it has no moral significance. It certainly has no political significance. And if you think there's political significance, you're the problem. That's not an exaggeration. This is from the mayor. The murder of the individual depicted, can't even say the name. The murder of the individual depicted in this mural was a devastating tragedy, but the misguided, isolating intent of those funding murals like this one across the country is divisive and does not represent Providence. Now again, think of how the left advances. It's always martyrs. Emmett Till, Matthew Shepard, George Floyd. Again, this is not like a religious movement. It is a religious movement, and it's a religious movement with far more sincere belief behind it than a typical church. The blood of the martyrs is the seed of the church, and if you do not have martyrs, you do not have a church. And so they have martyrs, and we are not allowed to have martyrs. And if the truth doesn't support the myth, famous example, Matthew Shepard dying over meth, not homophobia, for example, you just stick with the myth, and you just keep rolling. One movie or play or TV series is going to have a much greater impact than 1 million books or articles about what really happened. And people will say things like, oh, don't politicize the death. No. It is very necessary to politicize these kinds of deaths. Why? These deaths did not just happen. They're not just random tragedies. She didn't like suddenly get cancer and die on public transit. This was the outcome of state policy. This was the outcome of deliberate choices. And the people making those choices have names and faces and addresses. And you need to know who those people are. And really what we're talking about here is who you are allowed to feel empathy for. It's not really, and I know I say stuff like this, it's not really that they like get off on the death of Iryna Zarutska, although I think some of them do. I mean, some of them openly will say that, so it's not just me saying it. But more broadly, do I think most liberals like think it's funny what happened to her? No. But they're mad. What they're really mad about is that this murder distracts us from the moral goal of a post-white society defined by racial equality. White identity disrupts that. White victimhood does not compute with this kind of thing. And so you can't even allow recognition of it. More than that, if somebody does say, look, this happened, you have to label that immoral. It's divisive. It's in fact evil. Like the crime is just something unfortunate that happened, but you have agency. You're a white person. You have agency. You have moral responsibility. You're the one bringing this up. Why do you care? Why are you bringing this up? Why are you trying to divide us? I mean, the left is reactionary in the purest sense. They have this frozen model, essentially, of morality. And everything that is outside that is basically heresy. So you can't be surprised by actions like this. They do not recognize that you are allowed a collective political voice or shared political power. They really believe this. And that's why until we have white identity, we just don't get anywhere. We need to politicize our martyrs. We need to understand that we do not exist as individuals. We need to stop asking for moral recognition from our opponents who will never grant it to us. Why? Because to do so would destroy their entire self-image. There is no way out but through. Keep putting up the murals. Never back down. But understand there is no bottom to the depravity on the other side. Not just because they hate you, although it's that. Not just because they want more of these things to happen, although that may be part of it too. It's far worse. They really believe what they are saying. They really believe that you personally need to care about George Floyd, but that it is sick and even twisted and perverse to care about Iryna Zarutska, which is precisely why we need to never be silent about it. I wish this was all just cynical. I wish it was all just a political trick. But it's a sincere belief, and that is something which usually cannot be broken through reason. It simply must be overcome. I'm Kevin Deanna. We'll talk again real soon. All right, guys, that's it for today's episode of Identity Politics. If you found this valuable and you want to see more of this kind of work, here's how you can help. First, follow the show and share it with people who need to hear it. We're on Rumble, Odyssey, YouTube, X, TikTok, and you can also grab the RSS feed. Sharing it is the fastest way for us to grow. Second, sign up for our email list so we can always stay in direct contact no matter what the platforms decide. And most importantly, if you believe in our mission and want to keep it going, please consider supporting us on Ko-Fi. You can donate once or subscribe at the bronze, silver, gold, or white level. Every contribution, big or small, helps keep Identity Politics independent and alive. All the links are in the description below. Thanks for watching. Thanks for supporting. We'll see you next time.